Hello. It feels like so long since we were all last together on the green room. Um, those heady days of years ago when Nikki DeKuester and Heatherland battled it out to see who would win, and it was Nikki DeKuester with some excellent points, even in a very very closely fought competition, if it is a competition. But that was one of the key points. There isn't a competition, and it's just a load of words that we're all doing. It's great. I'm David Green. I am the author of the Empire of Ruin series and the Hell in Haven series, Epic Fantasy and Urban Fantasy. And thank you for coming back and joining us in Basking in the Evergreen, where we talk to the winner and the person who didn't win the Green Room. So with me for the next hour is Nikki DeKuester. There she is.
Hello.
I didn't know if you were going to be there or not. I was delayed. That's one of my delay tactics.
Well, yeah, I was here for maybe about 30 seconds, so good form.
Excellent. That was great. That was fantastic. So congratulations on winning the Green Room.
It was a lot of fun and insightful.
Right.
So
Because some of the points that were brought up, there's other sides to the points as well. Whereas, the critique sandwich, some people really like the critique sandwich.
yeah, I mean, I thought it was brilliant because I ran a critique group, and in so doing, I kind of wanted to learn the best technique so that I could tell people how to do it, because they'd be like, I don't know how to critique. And I'm a firm believer that I think critiquing should be part of any author process, because you're going to see stuff in other people's work that maybe it's harder for you to see in your own until you see it in theirs.
Exactly. Well, before we get into these kind of things and talking about how exactly you won, you turned it around.
I get insights into the mind of David.
Well, possibly, possibly, but it was just the way it happened. Heather scored the first point. So, but why don't you introduce yourself again for anyone who missed the Green Room and just coming in for the Basking in the Evergreen? Basking.
They want to bask in the Nikki.
Well, yeah, that's the sequel to this year. That'll be next year.
All right. So for anybody who didn't watch the other one, I am horror author Nikki DeKuester, and I am the writer of the Bittersweet Empathy series, which has this novel out, The Spiral, and this novelette, Red String. They're related. And it's about an apathetic girl who develops empathy out of nowhere, and like to literally be able to feel people's emotions and then also to control them. And she's like 16. She's going to get older as the series progresses, so it is more on the adult side. But I've recently been talking with my mentor, Gretchen McNeil. You guys might know her from Get Even on Netflix. She has been reading it and encouraging me to maybe think on YA a little bit more. So that may be in my future when I release the next book, to try a different marketing tactic. Because that's one of the biggest throw you into the deep end things about being an indie author or indie anything. Being your own boss in any capacity is learning marketing. So,
right. Well, yeah. So that was Nikki, and still is Nikki DeKuester. Ron is just leaving it on for a little while just to do his thing. So that's interesting because I've read The Spiral and Red Strings, and I wouldn't. There's certain content in those books what I would not say was YA. So with this advice in mind, is that more for like a different series in the future, or is it kind of like to be kind of marketing and kind of
That's what she
marketing?
was saying. That's what she does.
Yeah,
And I told her, I was like, there's explicit sex scenes in this thing. And by the
yeah,
way, there's sex scenes that can't be skipped without losing parts of what's going on.
right.
So it's integral to the plot.
Yeah, and there's quite. But again, I guess the thing is as well though is that like YA, like what is YA these days? Like it's
Yeah.
mainly it was invented as a marketing thing anyway in the first place, and a lot of the time, like look at the Hunger Games for example, is YA, but there's quite a
Yeah.
lot of violence and there's quite a lot of trauma and other things in it, and a lot of the time YA is just it's like well, it was written by a woman, so we're going to call it YA because we're
That's
not quite sure
possible.
what to do with it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there's like VC Andrews. I was reading that when I was like 9.
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
So was that considered YA?
Well, yeah, because that's the thing, like, because a lot of times people like if you look at some like classic stuff, like from what I would usually read, like fantasy. So you'd say like you'd look at what some people say would be YA, would be like, well, it's a younger protagonist, and it's a younger protagonist finding their way in the world, and it's a younger protagonist going on a change, but he goes to this, and it's like, well, that's most classic fantasy.
That's true. That oh god, that's so true. Oh my god, David. I just had this epiphany. You were so right. It's probably because I'm female.
It is.
Isn't
That's
it?
it.
Oh
Yeah,
god.
it is. Because like if you look at like the Belgariad, for
Look at
example,
me. I
right?
froze in frustration.
right. If you look at the Belgariad, right, it's about a younger protagonist who is a teenager and is finding his way in the world and goes on an arc to find himself. And it's classic fantasy because it's written by a man. If that was written by Lee Eddins, which most of it actually was, but he didn't give a credit at that time, it probably would be called YA, but it isn't.
Or look at Dracula versus Twilight.
Right.
The difference in how people perceive that. I'm like, it's the same goddamn story in a
Yeah,
lot of ways.
because Dracula is quite horny all the time.
Yes. There is a Twilight-esque love story in Dracula.
Right, yeah.
I
He's
love pointing this
horny.
out to people.
He's horny and angsty quite a lot.
The OG.
Yes, like a teenager. But
Oh god, that is so true. Yeah, because the spiral starts very YA feeling. It's 2 teenage girls going ghost
yes, it
hunting.
does.
It's like la
Yeah.
la la, you know, and then well, it's horror. Like I wanted to make sure that that came across to people because it to me YA keeps more on the light side and the sex doesn't get as in depth.
Mm.
But maybe I'm wrong. I don't read a whole heck of a lot of it anymore.
Maybe you should.
Maybe I should.
Maybe you should. People that are watching, if you've got any questions for Nikki, please do. Dracula doesn't sparkle. His
No, he
teeth
doesn't.
sparkle. He's got very white teeth, which is lovely. So all the blood that he drinks. He's got very lovely white skin as well. He's very pale. Should get out, probably not get out in the sun more because that would be he wouldn't like that. So if you've got any questions for Nikki as well on this, please do pop them in there. I have questions for Nikki. I know Nikki quite well, which helps because it doesn't mean because of the nature how we're doing it this time with this special edition of the Green Room. I didn't have time to prepare any questions because I didn't know who was going to win. So I usually have a few days to do it. But I could talk to Nikki all the time, so we have plenty of things we can talk about. But if you do have any, he did say that he would cross oceans of time, like Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Gary Oldman one. It's a weird, horny film. Like everyone in that film is super horny all the time. Even Anthony Hopkins. He's just like, he is well up for it the entire movie. All of them are. The only one who isn't horny is Keanu Reeves, who ends up having an orgy with a load of vampire brides.
Well, and horror deals with what? Themes of life and death.
Right, yeah, exactly.
So I don't
Exactly.
find it bizarre at all that there's sex scenes in horror.
Yeah. No, I think they go hand in hand, don't they? So yeah, questions for Nikki. Please pop them in there, and we will get to them. So,
I just happen
um,
to write it in a way that makes people uncomfortable, I think, because I put I took the sex and I made it horrifying. And those
right,
two aren't supposed to go
you're
together.
like you're like a modern. Yeah, it's Francis Ford. It's funny because it's Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's like we have several levels of ownership. I kind of think that like they did takes in that film, and then Francis Ford Coppola was like, "Can you do it again? But can you be more horny, please?" Like, yeah, fine, okay, let's do it this way. Um, but anyway, let's stop talking about Bram. We could do a whole show over Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, and I would be happy to talk about it. But
I took a class when I was in high school that I actually went to,
excellent,
and it was called Creature Connection. In the whole class, we just watched Dracula films, all of them, up to date,
nice,
and then we would like discuss
great,
them and the differences between them. So I've seen quite a lot of
quite a lot of
interpretations,
them.
including Blackula,
Yeah, that's good. I like that one.
but
There's
it
great
was
takes in them.
such a great course. And
Um,
it's an example of how horror has followed me my whole life.
everywhere.
I didn't like being scared. Like I didn't like watching horror movies or anything like that. Um, and I just sort of always fell into these
Yeah,
situations.
it's good.
So
So it's interesting. Just then, I wanted to kind of pick up on something you said about the sex scenes and the spiral, and you write them in a kind of uncomfortable way, and that. But that is a kind of staple of certain types of horror, like body horror in particular. I kind of think of H.G. Geiger with the whole kind of Alien and Aliens, which is very kind of like when you look at it through a certain lens, is very kind of sexual horror. Whereas
Electra,
like,
thank
yeah.
you for coming. Yes, Anne
And
Rice. You know I loved Anne Rice. Oh, Electra
yeah,
is well, she was my bestest friend back in the day. So Kayla, which is the best friend of the main character here,
mhm.
carries a little bit of Electra in
Oh
her.
dear, oh no, oh no, why would you do such a thing? So, yeah, and just we got a question here from Joe actually. Um, And he says, Nikki, you spoke about comparisons to other authors in the topic in the green room. And I'm curious who you looked up to and wanted to be like. So I guess this is when you probably started out your journey, because now you just want to be Nikki DeKuester, which I think is a perfectly good thing to want to be.
Narrow it down to one personality.
Yeah. So who was there anyone that you kind of looked up to and you kind of wanted to emulate when you started out?
Well, Anne Rice.
That's the easy one because it's just there.
And I didn't actually, yeah, the lecturers got it. She printed out. This was back in the 90s. She found and printed out the Interview with the Vampire script for me, so I could have it. Where I had that movie memorized.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
So
I
I
like.
very much looked up to her. But you know, I also was cognizant of the things I didn't like about her style either, or maybe not. Didn't like isn't the right word. That I felt like I could understand she went too far sometimes in some of the descriptions.
Hmm.
And while I love that immersion, I personally love that immersion. I consciously toned it back with
Right.
my writing because I was just aware it wasn't for everybody and didn't want to go there unless it was absolutely necessary. And I do immerse you at points in Amy's crazy. But
In more of a metaphysical way a lot of the time.
um, I don't know. Like I came at writing in a weird way because I wasn't a really huge reader um, in the traditional sense. I did a lot of role playing, in particular the Vampire the Masquerade role playing game.
Mhm.
I'd both run and play in it, and there's a lot of reading involved in that because there's just a ton of books and a ton of material. But then we would take our characters and like play them on forums in between games. And so I started writing backstories, started writing, continuations of things we didn't quite get to in the game but wanted to wrap up before the next one. And so I kind of had this, I don't know, in almost journaling, but out in the open so other people could
Mhm.
read it. And that's where I first started getting people like, "Oh, I read that. That was great," And so is that a better answer? Not as like
Well,
cliched?
that's where Amy came from, wasn't it? I mean, it came from that
Yes.
background of and your book came from that background of gaming.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so that was a big influence on you. Yeah, great question. Thanks, Joe. Any more questions? Please bring them up. Yeah, Anne Rice was. I heard a lot back from a lot of people that she was very interactive with her authors and very helpful to people.
Yeah,
So
I cried and was out of it for about a week when she died.
yeah,
This is not
yeah,
okay.
yeah. No, well, the people have an effect on you, don't they? That's just how it is. You grow up, like you said, in the green room. Like you put a bit of your soul into these books. So these writers did the same thing, right? So something we should talk about, because there was a number of personal attacks in your green room, that I noticed and I made
Shots
note of.
fired. Shots
Yeah.
fired.
So Nikki is one of my alpha readers for in for my books, and there was a number of comments that she made that were aimed specifically at me, which
That's
was
why I thought I was gonna lose.
yeah, it was good.
Because I
It
was
was
like, I know this is going right for his jugular.
right, yeah, no, yeah. So that was a risky gambit. So I was just wondering, like, what was it that could you just not help yourself?
Yeah, I couldn't help myself. And they happen to be things that are pet peeves of mine, you know.
Hmm,
And I don't know if you noticed, but I tried to put a positive spin on all of them
you did, yes,
because
yeah.
I don't like bitching in general. I feel like it. In fact, when I saw that you were doing this show, I was like, I don't know that I could go on that because I
Hmm.
don't know that I could get into that mentality. And people that know me from years ago would probably be like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" I have evolved a lot. Let's just say
Yeah,
I don't want to be in the negative energy anymore. So I was like, how can I do this in a way that is still uplifting? And I had fun with that. And
yeah,
it just also happened to be something that would needle you, and that's a bonus. And maybe a
right.
feature.
Yeah, and because I don't compare myself to other authors, and I don't kind of go into that kind of thing where it's like they're doing this and they're doing that and whatever. But I also hate most of my work.
You are your own harshest critic, for sure. So by
Yeah.
the time it comes out of David's head, and I've seen this in real time and it's freaky, it's like almost flawless. Okay. So I go in there and I'm like, I don't have a whole lot to do. Now, sometimes, you know, there is. I'm not going to say it's every time that it's like flawless. Sometimes I'm like, were you drunk when you wrote this
Yes.
paragraph? And that's how he knows I'm not just blowing smoke, you know. Um, at least I would hope at
Right.
this point you would trust that because I do the critique sandwich.
Mm.
And part of it is like I couldn't not put all of the embellishments or what do you call them? Condiments and stuff.
Compliments.
Garnishments. That's the word I'm looking for. The garnishments on this thing because that gives me joy. Like I love going through and reading stuff and I'm like, this is delightful, or this really got to me, or just letting my emotions flow in
Hmm.
free form.
Yeah.
And so when people are like, I don't want to hear that stuff, I've seen this. I'm like, that takes will just suck all the fun out of it for me.
Right.
I'm not critiquing for you. And I think, this wasn't said in the show, but I think it's fine if that is a conversation that you have between you and who you're critiquing. Like if you came to me and were like, don't, do that, I'm under deadline or it's distracting or whatever,
Hmm.
I could probably do it for a little while, but it would get to me. It would take a lot of the fun out of it.
Right.
And so I would have to rethink our relationship as like, critique partners if we were right for each other, which is
Mm.
very important. Like you got to find the right person who's going to be able to see, not only see the soul of your work, but help you improve it in
Hmm.
genuine ways.
Yeah. And that kind of brings us to, you mentioned a couple of times that you have mentorship with with Gretchen McNeil. Why don't you talk us a little bit about that for people that are kind of watching, because it might be something that they've not really kind of heard of before, and your role, your wider role with the HWA.
Yeah, so the HWA is the Horror Writers Association, and they have a mentorship program, and I'm an assistant with it. I help out with some of the administrative stuff, and we match author or up and coming authors with established authors, and kind of just put them together. And there's no real like it has to be rigidly this way.
Hmm.
They figure it out, like I was just saying, like, can we work together? You know, and so I come in with my expectations and I let her know up front. And then, if it really doesn't work out, we take them and find them other people. But it's a really great program. You got to be a member of the Horror Writers Association, and you don't even have to be a published author to do this. It's like $60 for a year membership. Um, and then, yeah, it can be a great resource for just like I'm learning a ton about the behind the scenes, what happens with shows, like when, because that is a dream that I had with this and have with this, is that someday it'll be made into something that I can see.
Right.
And so I was just, it wasn't planned this way, but I was ecstatic that I got her and get to pick her brain on that whole process and what it looks
Hmm.
like.
Yeah. And how has that helped you as a, how has that helped you? Because obviously you've got the first book written and you have Red Strings as well, and you're writing the second book at the moment. So how has that altered your approach in between whilst writing the second book? Now you have this mentorship.
Well, it has given me a little bit more confidence, um, because she's said just some awful nice things about my work,
He said some awful
some
things about.
awful nice things about it, and given me some pointers and things to maybe look at. Uh, so yeah, it's to get somebody who's so successful and out there saying, like, one of the compliments she gave me was that I should consider going into traditional publishing because my work is good enough. And while I do take that as absolutely the compliment that it is, I actually really like being an indie author. I like having control over my work and not having to put it through anybody. At the end of the day, I'm the one that has those final decisions.
Hmm.
Sink or swim, right? It's mine. And I just, it's not that I would say no. Like if they came to me and wanted to pick it up, I would have those discussions. But it's something that I chose first. I didn't start writing, shop it around, and then go, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm going to publish on my own. I looked at all of the variables and said, I want to do this on my own. I,
Right.
you know, and here I am. So,
And here you are. And that was one of the first things that I remember actually ever talking about to you, was that you were talking about. It's going to sound like you're a control freak, but about how like uh, how important it was for you to have, like, you could pick your own editor, you could pick you're involved in making the covers, you're involved in the whole aspect of it. Is that obviously it's still something that you still believe in quite a lot, but now that you're a little bit further on down the line, is there anything that you would have been like, well, this might have been a little bit more helpful, or this might have been helpful? The marketing, like, I know you've talked about that quite a few times.
Well, yeah, I mean, you do get a bit of help marketing, and depending, that is kind of the biggest hurdle for all of
Mm,
us and to
right,
overcome, just getting your book out there. Like once you've written it, and there's that meme out there that's like, you think that writing this thing is going to be the hardest thing you do
right,
until it's finished and ready to go. And then you're like, oh my God, there's another mountain.
right,
I'm smack
yeah,
in the middle of it now.
yeah. Because that's the
So,
thing. It's not, and um, it's not just like the marketing of it. It's that you're trying to write another book whilst
while
doing
marketing,
this
oh,
other thing.
that's a
Right.
beautiful point. But
Yeah.
I know from my research that they don't always, publishers don't always do a whole lot of marketing for you unless you're Stephen King, you know.
Right.
And so I weighed that against like the royalties that we get. So selling through Amazon, you get 70/30. So
Hmm.
they take 30%, you get 70%. If you're traditionally published, you might get 7 to 10%.
Yeah.
So now if you're super wildly successful, that 7 to 10% is going to be phenomenal.
Hmm.
But if you're not, maybe
Yeah.
not so much. So it is a gamble, I think, either way. And quite honestly, the thought of, because there's a whole process, I don't know if people know, but like of doing querying. And
Hmm.
that's where you look for an agent. And so you're constantly sending your work out there, and
Right.
rejection and rejection and rejection. And when I wrote this thing, I was not in a place in my life where I could have handled that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was already dealing with a lot of major life shit. You want to talk about
Hmm.
shit sandwiches?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just knew that too. So that was a part of it. I'm like, I
Hmm.
don't, could I have that mental fortitude now? I think so,
Yeah.
but
Because that's part of the thing as well. Like when you are querying with yeah, got really great at juggling. Yeah, that's juggling a lot of things, spinning a lot of plates. That's, when you're writing a book. Yeah, it's true. Um, when you are querying with authors, sorry, with agents, a lot of the time from I've never done the process myself, but from people that I know that have been successful and got agents, are people that have kind of kept doing it. Is like, so a lot of the feedback they get back from people is like, I love this book, but
I don't know how to market it.
I don't know how to market it, or it's
Yeah.
not quite right for my list because the contacts I have
Can you
are this.
change this? Can you change? No.
Right, and that's where that kind of can come in, and and that depends on like what kind of story that it is, and one of the things that struck me about the Spiral, and I was lucky enough to beta read the Spiral as well, so I've seen it quite early on. Was that there is
David
a lot.
helped me fix a pivotal scene in this thing. Like everyone else was afraid to touch it. And he was like, this is off. And I was like, you're right. And not only this is off, but this goes into the critique thing too. So it's not just about pointing out what doesn't work. You gave me some possible solutions,
Right,
and that
because
matters.
sometimes you can do that. Other times it can just be like, look, this just I don't know what it is, but like this as well, which isn't super helpful. But sometimes that is. Can you make the protagonist a donkey? Why not? Let's go for it. Yeah. Thank you for that. That's very nice. Thanks for saying that about my beta reading. But there was a lot of you in the Spiral, and like there's and that's the same for every author. But there's a lot of, I think, we've talked about before. There was a lot of young Nikki DeKuester in Amy, and there's a lot of your kind of like worldview in it, and like how you kind of look at things. So to go in that kind of process where it would be like, okay, well, what can we do to make this more mainstream marketable? Would be
Yes.
kind of
Oh,
taking the soul out of it.
nail on the head. Nail on the head. Yes. It is. It's like other people mucking about in your soul, which when it's made into like a Netflix show, for example, you're going to have that. You know, there is a certain amount you have to compromise to a degree because you've got now different visions, right? So I don't think I would be that ardent in that situation that it be exactly like the book.
Right.
Um, but
Because
this is my
adaptation is
book,
different. Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
my soul. It's a piece of me.
Right.
So, and I guess it depends on how you look at your writing too, because some people like me look at it like a part of them. I have stories to tell um, that are very close to me in various ways. Every character I've ever played, I've explored an aspect of myself, you know, and it's interesting. And the role playing can get this psychological, right? And
Hmm.
Amy's no different. So she is, and it's interesting too, coming at it from a role playing perspective and having her having been a character and so many years of role playing too, is that um, the characters do differ in various ways.
Hmm.
A little bit more than I think had I just written it starting out, not having that experience. So she isn't exactly the same as me, but there is, of course, there's a lot of me and her and all the characters in one way or another. And a little bit of Electra and Kayla.
I love it. Yeah, and we all know what happens there. So no spoilers. You have to read the book to do it. But yeah, yeah, it's a good comment. But I think the thing is that we've talked about this before is that we Naked Fur as the CEO. um, Visual adaptations are different, right? That's part and parcel of it. It's a different way. It's a different medium, and it's a different way of telling a story. And it's one of those things that you kind of have to. I'm always one of these people that I'm like, the book still exists. It doesn't matter,
Yeah,
right?
me too. I
Yeah,
agree.
yeah, it's still there. And if it gets more people to read the books, then that's brilliant. That's amazing. So we got a question earlier on there as well from Joe, I think it was. Yes, there you go. Great work, Ron. Brilliant, lovely. That was amazing. It's like we've done this before. So in alpha reading and the editing you do, what lessons or tricks have you taken and applied them to your own writing?
Oh, geez.
I'm the CEO. I'm the CEO of Netflix. Just so you know.
All right. Well, I got lots of dirt on you.
I wish I was the CEO.
So my show will be forthcoming by the end of the year.
Thanks.
Okay. Can you put the question back up, Ron?
Yeah, Ron.
I get a little scatterbrained and I'll start thinking about
I'll
other
read it to you
things.
again. So in oh, there we go. In alpha reading and the editing that you do, what lessons or tricks have you taken and applied them to your own writing?
Oh God, there's just so much of everything. Um,
What's the most surprising thing that you found out when you've been doing kind of alpha reading and editing? Is there anything that you've kind of like seen and you've
well,
and
recently, actually, with your writing, because you're so much faster than me, and it has been so helpful to see that, and that it's okay to come back and clean it up later, because I had this tendency to want it to be perfect before I show it to anybody.
mm,
Um, and not for no reason either, because sometimes in perfecting a single sentence, it can change the trajectory of the entire story. You know, it'll be like, I use this word choice. Ooh, where could that go? You know? And so there's a fun aspect to it too. But I also realize that I'm mortal and that I will grow old and die. So I do need to speed it up. So that part has been helpful. And then it's just like little tips and tricks, things like filter words, seeing them in people's writing and being able to then recognize when I'm doing it, or maybe when a sentence gets too fluffy,
mm,
and being able to be succinct more with it and understanding that even if the sentence is beautiful, like if it hinders the reader's flow, an understanding of the scene, it has to go.
Right.
And you see that when you're critiquing in a way that you don't, and just also that we're all different again.
Mm.
Like everybody's style is so different, and there's beauty. Like I delight in finding that beauty in everybody's stories, and to see that little light, that spark that drove them to learn this craft, because there's so much to it. So, does that answer it?
There you go. That does answer it. Well, yeah, that's Joe. Joe asked the question, but I like the answer anyway.
All right.
Yeah, along with selling more copies of, you also get a lot of people on your side who say this video show is better, good, but the book is better. Or even though they fucked that show up so badly. Yeah, you do get that. You get you also get a lot of people from well, you get a lot of people coming out not approving of casting choices for various reasons as well these days.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's that piece of your soul. So
Yeah,
once
yeah,
that
yeah,
soul piece goes out, it's going to change. There's no
yeah.
getting
That's right.
around it. The actor's
That's
going to
right.
bring something different to the role, maybe something better, maybe oftentimes something worse,
Yeah,
right?
because there's a few things that I can think of where I think the movie or TV show is better, and one of those would be Fight Club, which I think is a much better movie than the book. You know,
I would agree. The book is great too,
mm,
but yeah.
the
Well,
movie is
you got the Edward Norton factor. Okay. He
it's
just,
a better it's a better ending as well.
yeah, yeah,
You know?
I think so.
And
Although
Planet
the
of the
book
Apes.
was doing a different thing, right? It was,
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was.
so it's delightful to get to the end of it though and be surprised. I
Yeah,
thought.
yeah,
I
yeah,
was like,
yeah,
"Oh,
yeah. But choke sucked for both, right? But and Planet of the Apes was better the film than the book.
oh, I didn't read
You know?
the book."
You know? The ending is completely different, and obviously the ending is kind of what makes the movie. Um, but the ending is completely different than the book to the point where, like, I think the author was also like, "Wish I thought of that."
Well, and yeah, and Stephen King's Mist is the same way. Where the
The
ending
Thomas
is
Jane
very
one,
different.
yeah, the Thomas Jane one is so good, and the ending of that movie is like so powerful.
Yeah, I think it worked. It worked way better. So
Yeah, 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 yeah.
sometimes it happens.
Sometimes. But I think as well, it's one of those things like, especially with the kind of the Stephen King stuff. You had a lot of it was Frank Darabont. Darabont was doing that, and he has like a real kind of reverence for Stephen King, I think, as well, doesn't he? Yeah, Goodfellas as well, yeah,
Yeah, so you get people
and
that resonate with that soul.
exactly. So they
Yes.
kind of know where to do like the improvements and where to make the kind of changes. And like obviously with King now, you have Mike Flanagan doing it, where he's kind of like he understands it so well, he's able to go, oh, this is where we can make this change. This is where we can do this. Oh, but Godfather is the same as well. Like I don't know if you've ever read the Mario Puzo novel. It's just fine.
Mm-mm.
It's fine. Like, but the movie's much better. Um, I saw the movie Wanted. I have no idea how they got that from the source material. I've seen the movie, I've not seen the source material. We got a question as well up at the top there from Misty. Excellent, thanks, Joe. How do you decide when you are finished? I've seen some authors write characters into the ground and kill great series, and others who killed fantastic characters too early, and try to continue the idea without them, but there's no one to care about anymore. And other authors who re-release their work with added content, which they just think adds but interrupts the pacing of the book. So
Ooh.
yes, when do you decide when you're done, and when do you decide because you've killed some of your characters?
Mhm.
You know,
Yes, I
when do
have.
you decide to do that,
When do I decide to kill them?
or why do you decide to do it? Like, what is it that's why do you pick that moment? You know, have you regretted killing some of your characters?
No.
No.
It's not a decision that I took lightly. Like you hear sometimes people are like, "Oh, they just want the drama of killing off a character." That was not the case. Um, I, in fact, I cried when I realized that I had to what I had to do in this
Mm-hmm.
particular. I'm just so emotional all the time.
Yeah.
But I get attached to these characters, right? They're part of me, and I'm like, oh, this is so tragic, But it has to happen for the story. So, in terms of like authors doing it too soon, too late or maybe shouldn't do it at all. I think that's a personal value judgment on the part of the reader.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, you know, when the ideally, by the time it gets to the point where it's published, it's seen many eyes.
Right.
And you're going to have people point out these things. So I think if an author decides to go with it, that is their vision. And that
Mm-hmm.
should be respected. I strongly feel that even if I disagree, and we've had this discussion in some of your work, David, there's been some scenes that I thought should be in there. And I pushed for them. And ultimately, you decided on the one, which was great. And I think it'll be better for it. But had you come back to me and said, no, I really don't want to go there. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely would have respected it and gone with it as is. So I think that's really important to remember that this is a piece of artwork and it can't be all things to all people. So to
Mm.
enjoy what you do like in it, even if you don't agree with the choice, it has its own beauty. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah. And I mean, and there's some characters, I don't know about you, but there's some characters that you kind of create where their sole purpose is to die at some point because it's going to be bad for the main characters. And there is, I don't know if if a lot of people will admit that, but it's certainly the case where it's like this character means so much to this character, and this character's death is going to devastate this character, and they have to experience it.
Well, in my case, try not to get too spoilery with it, but there's a character that was not supposed to stay in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but then they ended up staying in the book, and there was no getting around it. Like as I started writing it, I was like, they are not going anywhere. So, but knowing where the series was headed, I was like, this is problematic, and how am I going to fix this? And so I was open. I was really open as I was writing to the different ways that it could go. And then one day I'm just sitting there brainstorming, and I was like, oh, I have to do this, and I have to do it this way, and I'm terrible.
Yeah.
My poor Amy,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I was out of it for about 3 days.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
not okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Joe says there's a couple in Path of War that he wanted to go, and some have a horrible death. I'd like to know what characters you would like to have seen killed in
Ooh.
Path of War.
But see, that don't get spoilery because then you'll know they're
I know,
still
yeah,
alive.
but I don't mind. It's been out for a year now, so it's fine. The sequel's out next month, so it's fine.
Oh, should I just go ahead and spoil them?
You know, yeah, you know what happens to them. But there was obviously there was a there was a death in Path of War, which I planned. I knew it was going to happen. I knew how it was going to happen before I started writing the first book, and it was still it was still tough to do because it's that character was kind of based on somebody that from my past
Yeah.
in a way, and so that there was that aspect of it. But also, I knew how much it would be tough for Colleen, because it was she'd not had the best of times, but it's important for the story.
Yes. Yeah, and the way that I did this particular death, talk about learning. I came across a meme that was like, hey, if you really want to make your deaths impactful, boom, 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 boom,
Mm-hmm.
do these 6 things. And I was like,
Yeah,
yoink, 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 yoink. I'm going to do all of them. And so
yeah,
I did. And so it comes as a reader, and we got a story structure question that I saw pop up. So this speaks to that. The story structure, where I place this death is not where you would expect it on a subconscious level as a reader.
mm-hmm.
It's not supposed to be there.
Right,
And so to me, that was an extra added gut punch,
yeah,
and I
yeah.
liked that. I'm like, oh, great. Yeah, put it there. you know,
Yeah, and that's the way with these kind of things, like with story structure and stuff. Like it's important to know about it, but also I think we've got to that point where it's so recognizable now that it's also you have to kind of learn when it's good to break
yeah. Know
those
it so
things.
that you can break it.
Yeah.
is perfect.
Yeah.
Um, and it can get paralyzing,
Mm.
right? To be like, well, I have to follow it this way instead of allowing the story to flow and do what it does naturally. And then if there are structural problems with it, if there's something that's off and missing, knowing the structure is great because you can pinpoint what it is that's just maybe gnawing at you, and
Yeah.
then give voice to it and be like, that's why I feel like it needs this to be satisfying.
Hmm.
So I think they can go hand in hand, but story structure should not trump flow,
Right.
especially in the beginning.
And you come from it from a very character-driven point of view, anyway, which is
Yeah.
different to story structure, to like hero's journey or whatever, which is very much like, this is how you write a story, but you're coming from it from a this is what this is my characters.
And what she does in these given
Yeah.
situations, which ended up actually being more like a tragedy.
Right.
I call it the tragedy of Amy Doreen is the subtitle,
Yeah. Yeah.
subtitle, whatever.
Yeah. It's a
For
subtitle.
a reason, it is not the hero's journey.
Hmm.
She does not have that.
Right.
It does not end well,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. And as I was, so I wrote a big chunk of it before I really dove into what story structure was. Anybody looking for a good book on this, by the way, might want to check out the Story Grid. They have a podcast too with tons of episodes. It was an invaluable resource to me in learning a story structure, and they take you through each week the writing of the novel in real time. And
Hmm.
so that was really helpful. I got maybe about 3/4 of the way through the spiral when I started looking at story structure, and then I went back through, and I was like, oh, I'm hitting this stuff just knowing story, from living
Hmm.
it, from being human.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah. Yeah.
think story is so in us that, we talked about not everybody has a book in them, but I I think to a degree we do. Now, whether or not you pull that book out, because we all have a story,
Hmm.
whether or not you want to pull that out and make it into a book or have the
Right.
fortitude
Yes.
to do that,
Yeah.
that's a different animal. But it
That's
doesn't
the
mean that you
self
can sit around the fire telling stories. Or
the
for
self
20
loathing.
years.
The self-loathing to sit down and to tell and do the story through a
Yeah, the
book.
masochism that it
Yes.
takes to devote so much of your life to sitting and staring at a screen alone with imaginary people in your head.
Right. Yeah. 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 That's exactly right. Um, yeah. So we got a question up there as well from Heather.
I will
Excellent.
say that that's where critique partners can come in too. Like with
Yeah.
you, I'm in your document as you're writing, and I find that to be interestingly sociable. you
Thanks.
know,
Yeah.
um, you and Chris both, and the way that I do it is I'll send the whole thing off at once and then go back through the comments, and then it's the live document on Google Docs too. So I'll
Right.
talk as they're going, but like some readers want to just be left to go and they don't
Yeah.
want the interruption. And then some readers are like, please talk to me,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm
Like,
the talk to me variety.
yeah, I kind of like doing it in the kind of like 3 chapters ahead kind of way, which is the way I kind of work because because I'm somewhere in between a plotter and a pantser. Like I kind of know where the story's going, so I kind of want to know as I'm kind of writing the next chunk that the previous chunk is going in the right direction.
Yeah, I could see
You
that.
know,
And
um,
I do have I send chapter by chapter to a group of people, including you.
mhm, mhm.
Um, and so I do get that feedback as I go to. Oh,
Yeah,
what's that? I didn't see that.
it's not, I'm a plantster.
A planster,
This is
yes.
true. But yes, we got a question from Heather up there above. We'll get to that one, and then we got a couple more little questions before we finish up for the next interview. So yeah, how do you deal with not giving spoilers? I get excited. I tell a story before they read it because one of the things is like especially when you get into doing a series, when you're writing the next blurb for the next book, you're already spoiling the last book to an extent as well.
Yeah, to an
Aren't you?
extent, yeah.
Yeah. Right. So
Well,
how do
then,
you deal with that?
how do I deal with not giving spoilers? Well, if you go look up the Bookish Bryants, It's bookish, and then Bryants. I have a 2.5 hour interview where I do go into spoilers. So part of
Mhm.
it is that I got it out of my system
It's
elsewhere.
liberating. It's
It is.
liberating. It's so good when you can talk to someone and do a full kind of spoiler
You're
discussion
like,
with it.
well,
It's just
yeah,
like great.
because this thing was in my head and now it's out and
Right.
people are understanding it
Yeah.
mostly.
I did a book club interview this week, just gone. I think you watched it. I think with people from Japan, which was really weird. I was kind of thinking like, did they all read it in English? They must have done because of this Japanese translation.
International
Um,
sex symbol, David Green.
but it was great though because they were asking me like specific questions about like the book, like why and choices, like why did you decide to do this? What was this? And it was like really specific, and it's like this is great because I don't have to just kind of like, oh, I can't say this and I can't say that and I can't. It's just like
Yeah,
just do
because you
it.
read it. Oh, that's such a
Yeah,
good point.
yeah,
Yeah, and then it's this thing that you share, and it's so deep. It's a thing that I don't think everybody gets to experience really when you think about that. To have this intimate connection with, your readers, really at the end
yeah.
of the day. It's
Right.
interesting. I never really looked at it like that, but
Maybe that can be a
you're
new show on the Go Indie Network. Is like full spoilers, and just out there.
full.
Come in and you just pick the whole book apart and just talk about everything.
Well, I always think that people want to come ask me the biggest question of what the fuck is wrong with you?
Right.
you know, because some of this stuff, goes to some places. It's horror, and
Hmm.
people will be like, that came out of you? Yeah, that came out of
Yeah,
me.
shut us down to a spoiler show. So we've got two more questions. We've got a question from Misty from 1906 about what do you guys, excellent, you read my mind. What do you guys do to organize ideas, software, or old-fashioned pinballs on notebooks? I don't think I've ever asked you this actually. How do you do that? What do you do? Is it all just in here?
I have like a wall, like one of those conspiracy board walls. I wish I had space for that. I would. My whole room would be like post-it notes, like a crazy person, and then I'd use none of it.
Yeah.
My process is I write down like here's my notebook for spiral with
Hmm.
Poppy on it.
Queen
So
Poppy, Princess
yes,
Poppy, Queen
Queen,
Poppy and the
Queen
sequel. Spoilers.
Princess. This is such a good story. If you have not seen Trolls, I was unexpectedly delighted by this thing. It made me laugh so hard,
I've
and it's
seen
so
it many,
dark
many
while being
times.
so happy. And
Yeah,
that is just it's something that I strive to do too. I should say that about my writing. As dark as
yeah,
it gets, I try so hard to put humor into it
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the
everywhere
way.
that doesn't fuck with the tone.
That's the way
Like,
you got to do it. That is
yeah,
the way you got to do
I
it,
think
isn't it?
so. I think so. So
There
I
was,
have these little tabs that make me look organized that I I sometimes use, and it'll be for like different colors coded for things that are important. Let me see. So, I've got my blurb that I worked on
Mhm.
in here, and then I'll outline and then change the outline and whatnot. So it's important for me to write it down, and I don't know if it's because I was born in a time before computers were really big, but seeing it visually then imprints on my brain, and I can remember it.
Right.
It's my superpower from school.
Yeah. Excellent.
um,
It's good to
so
have them.
and then I have documents where I throw ideas in, and I'll go back through and be like, okay, I remember it had this word in it, and so then I'll go search for that. And I'll be like, okay, because sometimes every once in a while, I'll write out a scene. Like I'll feel super inspired for a scene that isn't happening yet. It's rare because I like to go and where the characters go, but sometimes I'll write that out and that'll be sitting there and waiting for. Usually, it's
Mhm.
something that's gonna happen one way or the other. And
Right.
I've spoken to this before about like, okay, characters, I need you to get here or something around here.
Yeah.
How can
Cooperate.
we work together? You know,
Yeah. Cooperate with me, please. Do,
cooperate.
do what it is that I want you to do.
And so
Um,
I've got Daniel in here, and he is a jackass.
he is a jackass. Yeah, he is.
he he's a fun character to write, but like does his own thing a lot and gets unruly with me. And so, like, there was a scene where I needed him to do a certain something to reveal something about himself, and he kept not wanting to do it and not wanting to do it. And then, like, finally, I was like, fine, I guess you're just not. He's like, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. I'm like, all right, because I won't go against what the character, if the character puts their foot down, absolutely, I will find another way. I will, because I want to respect that. I don't ever want the character to do something that they wouldn't. And the readers know that. They'll pick up on that. And so that's part of immersing myself so deep. I respect this. And so it came down to a point where I was like, well, that's just done. And then he pops in and does the thing I need him to do in this other way. And I was
Right.
like, thank you.
That's Daniel for you.
Yeah.
He's a bad boy.
Yes, he is.
He's a very, very bad boy.
If you like bad boys and like toxic romances,
Right.
this is your book.
And inappropriate behaviour in churches, the Spiral is definitely for you.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll just say that.
Definitely. Well, Nikki, thanks so much for coming on. Thanks for coming on the green room in the first place. Well done for winning it. Thank you for spending the hour with me talking. It's been my pleasure. So we got one last question from Joe. How do you feel your life is going to change now you've won the green room?
Well, I feel lighter and airier and happier. And I feel like that will carry on into the rest of my life in beautiful and positive ways. It's like a seed planted in this green room, this green growing room.
It's like a greenhouse. It's not as hot as a greenhouse.
It's very warm and very caring. And I felt the time went by ridiculously quickly.
Exactly. Excellent. Me too. We could have talked for a lot longer, and we have.
Yes, David is a gracious host.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for coming to the green room, and thank you for basking in the evergreen afterwards. And for everyone who is watching, the next interviewer is up in literally a minute. With unfortunately talking to Ron, but he's all right. We like him. It's Heather Lang, who was great on the green room, did a great job, great points, and really, we'll be right back.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of Words That Kill, and today,
what is the balance to the thing that you're trying to introduce?
I know that the feeling. I had two gods go to war in one of my books, and I had to work on that scene for a long time, so they just didn't basically destroy the entire world.
It's too easy to go about that. It's not as interesting if every novel ends with someone being burnt, to save someone else.
Technically, they didn't burn witches, except in Germany, though. I'm just saying. They actually hung witches and then burned the bodies. That's where the fire comes in. What was her first kill like as an assassin, without spoilers?
What's the slowest way to die? What's the slowest way to bleed out? And that ended up being where he had to stab.
Okay, you're going to have to tell me that off camera. So.
Hello, welcome back.
Hi.
We are here with Heather, the loser, in the punishment portion of the show.
I actually think I won because I get to hang out with you for the next half an hour.
Oh my gosh, now you're my favorite. And that leads me right into my first question, which was, I was rooting for you. You obviously deserve to win. Apparently the show is fixed. So my question is, have you done something to make David Green mad at you, or to make him dislike you, to cause him to just ignore reality and make Nikki the winner?
I was actually a last call, last minute, last ditch hope that we even got to do a show at all. So because I have no life, I'm like, yay, Joe, let's do it. So here I am.
You were the savior this week. That was great. Now, did you expect to lose, or were you unjustifiably optimistic?
I had no idea what I was getting into. The only topic I knew that I wanted to talk about was how freaking annoying it was that I can't get any privacy to do jack shit around here. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about was, that I am so much more than an author, but I couldn't because of the whole episode before had actually touched on that topic. And I'd have been, Pete and repeat. So, I kind of got.
Yes. No, I get it. Excuse me. Now, do you? Oh, that is.
I love you, Joe. He's got me again on Sunday
What
as
happened?
a jump up and go, yay! Let's do something else. I have no idea that I'm getting into because I'm great at winging it. Because Joe's been great. I've known him since Go Indie started,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he's one of the first people I met in the industry when I decided to kind of like come out of the closet and be like, okay, this is the face behind the books. So, getting to actually go out and be on Joe's show, God, I think it's been like 4 or 5 years now that I was on his show the first time. It was really, it was therapeutic to say, this is the face behind the words. Because before that, I didn't want any of the attention.
Gotcha. Now, you alluded to this during the show, but do you usually lose, or was
Yes,
this a new experience? So yeah,
all the time.
yeah.
Yep,
I
my
mean,
grandma said if I saved every dollar I spent on lottery tickets, I'd already be rich.
oof.
So, yeah.
Well, but those kids wouldn't have schools. So,
Exactly.
I mean,
I'm supporting the
you're a
children
hero.
here.
Yeah.
And yeah.
If you can save just one child, Heather, that's all that matters. So, how many books had you written before you decided to come out and start, you know,
Um,
revealing the face behind the books?
I wrote Chronicles of Promisere Volume 1 and Volume 2 in the matter of 6 months. That was in 2007. In 2008, I wrote Immortal and the Howling, which was my second series. In 2010, I wrote Duality and Singularity, which was my third series. And then I wrote Love Bleeds in War and Born to Reign. And I got hooked into an anthology series that I wrote as both of my author names. So I had 2 stories in each of the years. So I got hooked into that, and that was the last, 2 years of my life. And I managed to get out a short story in between. And I think at the end of it, I got burnt out. I've still got, this anthology to finish, and it's just, it was a lot.
I see. But where were you in that process when you started
It
coming on the shows?
was It was right after my third series, so about
Okay.
2015, 2016. Yeah, because it was
Gotcha.
right after I separated with my second husband. Don't
Cool.
ask.
I
And
won't. So you had a lot of books out already then, 6
and
books.
yeah, I
Yeah.
already had 6 books, and they were all part of a series. And, I was just writing for the love of writing. I decided I wanted to get into it because a lot of my friends were from West Virginia, where I lived at the time, and they had 3rd, 4th, 5th grade reading levels. So they couldn't really read a normal book and understand it. So I started writing for them and being able to tell a story at a level that they could understand and still enjoy as adults. And that's what got me really into it in the first place.
Well, I have not heard that, you know, impetus for starting to write. I mean, that is a very unique origin story. Now,
Yeah.
which of your books is your favorite?
My favorite one is Love Bleeds in War. I have re-released it underneath my J.R. Gansky, and it is a story about 2 countries who have been at war for longer than they can remember, and the children of these people that started the war don't even know what they're fighting for anymore. So in the end, they have to try to figure out, how can we end this? Because all it is endless bloodshed and torture and hate, and nobody knows why. We're 3 generations into this. Why are we still fighting? And that was my favorite one to write, and it was because mostly I dedicated it to my stepdad, and it was the last one that he was able to read before he sadly passed away of cancer.
Oh,
So, but he was an Army MP, and he really inspired a lot of the military background characters of that story. So that one's always going to be at the top of my list.
nice. Well, now I want to read it. But
I'll
let's get
send you
into
a copy.
Well, thanks. Let's get into the meat of the show.
Mhm.
Your first topic was my favorite one, I would say, of your three. The interruptions and distractions when you write.
Yeah.
Now,
I'm so surprised my dogs are quiet because Dad's hasn't been home for hours, and they're all Dad's puppies. So the fact that they've been so miserably quiet has been a real blessing tonight.
that is good. My dog's been pretty good. I think I tired her out earlier though. But so I mean, I believe it was your strongest topic. Do you think it was as well?
In between that and wanting to touch on the fact that I am so much more than an author, it's wanting to connect, and it's wanting to be what I am, where I am, and when I am, and not being restricted to any definition therein. And I think that's just where all of my passion was this episode was I wanted to show that it's okay to go through all of this, because it's not all peaches and cream. It's not all fancy offices. It's writing at doctor's appointments. It's taking a pen and paper down to the beach. It's spending days away from home to finish something. There's a lot of things that go into this that the average reader doesn't really understand.
Understood. And I was very excited after your first topic because I thought you were going to destroy Nikki.
I didn't want to destroy Nikki. I think she's wonderful, and to actually have somebody that I could converse with like that was amazing, because I don't get to have conversations like this very often. And that's just the truth of life is you kind of end up separating yourself there from the life around you, because it's a completely different world, and you have to figure out how to live in both.
But we can like or even love Nikki and still want to destroy her.
I guess.
There's nothing contradictory there.
I do want to go out and get her books, though, as soon as I can get my
that'll
phone to
teach her.
connect to my Amazon. Exactly.
That'll teach her.
Screw you! I'm going to support you.
On
I'm
another
gonna go
show,
buy your book, and I'm going to ask you to sign it, bitch.
on another book or show I work with, Indie Mayhem. It's a game show on the Go Indie Now network.
Mhm.
Some of the people who have lost have declared the winners as their nemesis.
No.
And I very much like that. So I can sense you're not going to do that with Nikki.
Nope. Because I'm in
That's
a totally
disappointing.
different ballpark. Like I said, I quit.
True. Well, that's true. Now, I was riding high after your first topic because it was great. Then we got to your second topic,
Mhm.
and so I'm trying to take notes, and it was very confusing for me. I wrote down distracting yourself with research, and is it okay to change as an author? Yeah, that was sad for me. That was a rough one for me because I felt your victory slipping away, and really
it was half the tequila where I lost where my words were for a minute, because that liquid courage only goes so far before you forget how to English.
Well, I don't have a question about that topic so much as just a comment. Shame on you.
I know.
Broke my heart.
Whatever, you'll get over it.
That's true. I will. I'm not super invested, but still it happened. Now, your third topic was the shocker.
Yeah.
I mean, of the whole show, that was the giant shock.
Yeah. Here, let me stab you twice on that one, because
and of course, it wasn't really a rant.
No.
Like you said, it was more like an announcement, a proclamation.
It's a flat out statement.
Of
because
your
I mean, nobody knows this. Nobody knows that I spent the entire last year and a half of my life creating a intro for a film. So I have 2 animations featured in a film by Defective Dream Entertainment. And I don't get to talk about it because all people give a shit about are my books.
Well, I think A.F. Stewart nailed it. And congratulations, by the way. That's awesome.
Thank you.
But uh but are you sad at all that you let me down by letting Nikki win?
No. I have
Why?
absolutely no regrets in my life. I will never have any regrets, and you wouldn't like me if I did.
Oh, Joe did. That makes sense. He knows everything. But out of your 3 topics, I mean, 2 was confusing for me, and then 3 wasn't really a topic at all. But what do you think? Which of your 3 topics was the worst one? In
The
terms
worst
of
one was the middle
competing for
one.
the
I
show.
stumbled
Okay.
across the words, and
All right.
I was looking for the words to explain that you spend so much time. I have spent so much time just staring at a damn picture, and I'm not getting anywhere. And I think it's just because of my background of pushing myself through 16 novels and short stories and all this other stuff that I was doing, that I'm finally reaching a point where I'm just going to sit there and stare at something because I'm bored.
Wow.
And I want more.
Well, so you announced the change. And you talked a little bit about what the plan, but can you explain further and flesh out what it is you're actually going to be doing?
Thank you, Nikki. I love you, really. I can't wait to just sit down and have a conversation with you now that, all of this is over and we got to meet and blah, 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 blah. But enchantinglyentangled.com has been my website since 2007. I started off by a way to showcase my own work. And then my web host had a tragedy and he quit. So I went to school and learned how to do it. And I decided I really liked it. And I like doing the design and the coding, and this whole new world of language to me was opened up. So I started getting more and more into that. I took my certification, I took my bachelor's. I'm now taking my master's in business. And I'm doing all this while working full time and writing and, doing all the stuff that I normally have to do on a daily basis. And I have met some fantastic people. I have some groups that I'm a part of on Facebook, and everybody's like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And it's just a group of mentoring. And I'm like, on my website, it says advice is always free. And that is exactly what I said in the episode, where, advice should always be free. If you need somebody to come and talk to and bounce ideas off of, you shouldn't have to pay for that. You should be able to sit down and talk to somebody, and that's who I want to be. If you need help after that, yeah, I'll help you with the editing. I'll help you with the formatting. But I would rather teach you how to do it for yourself so that you don't have to depend on anybody else. Because I did it. I learned it the hard way. I went to college for it. I finished all the marketing and the masters and all of this stuff. And I finally sat down and said, it doesn't have to be this hard.
Well, that sounds like an amazing benefit for the rest of us.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I mean, even in the first episode of In the Green Room, people, one of the topics was, how many hats you have to wear, how many things you have to learn as an indie author that aren't the writing. And I know that for me, I've read some indie books that I thought were amazing, so good. And the people who wrote them are not interested in promoting.
Yeah.
They don't want to be out there.
No.
They use a pseudonym and their face is nowhere to be seen. And I've invited them on shows and they're just.
And I fought for a very long time with, am I going to tell everybody that I'm writing underneath J.R. Gansky, or am I just going to disappear? And it just got to the point working with this anthology where I had to start telling people, look, both of these stories are me, get off my ass. So,
Yeah.
and it just became more work than what it was worth to try to promote the author I was versus the author I am versus, everything changed. And I wanted to go into, the script writing and the screenplays and the design. The design of it is so beautiful. I mean, there is a poster on the wall where I work now because I designed the logo for the company. And I got to do that. Everybody walks up to the store now and is like, I love your sign. And I'm like, thank you. I did that. and that is where writing led me. And it is so weird to just to have that epiphany sitting here going, well, shit.
Well, I wonder how many indie authors have had a similar experience. That learning all the different things you need to do to progress as an indie author and get your book in front of people, have that those parts have appealed to them more than the writing. I mean,
Yeah.
that's to me that's a very interesting path to kind of stumble across.
Hmm.
And then because I mean, as soon as you tell people you're writing a book, everybody it seems
Yeah.
like almost everybody's like, I've thought about writing a book, or I'm also writing a book.
when I
And
when I applied for this job, it was like, look, I've got 12 novels published to date. I've done this, I've done that, I've done the other thing, and they're looking at me like, you are way too qualified to be here. You are like overly qualified for this job, and I'm like, I don't care. This is what I want to do, and that's the difference. You have to be where you want to be.
well, indeed. And it's just so interesting to me that the people who there's so many people who want to be a writer, right?
Hmm.
That's the end goal for them. And to have it lead you to another destination is, I mean, just, yeah, very
Yeah.
interesting to me. I mean, I enjoy a lot of the various hats we have to wear, but not like you do. I mean, I have yet to find one that I like more than writing. I mean, I certainly
Yeah.
enjoy participating in these shows, and I guess that's part of marketing, but it's still
Yeah.
creative. We're
And
writing
and
lots of
I love
things.
being able to, to meet the new people and be able to have these kind of conversations and to do these things, that I wouldn't get to normally do on a regular basis because, you don't go around talking to people. I have one writer friend that I help with his script writing. He does comic books. And we'll sit down and he'll open his website and, we'll sit there and we'll work on it together. And every once in a while, we'll stream on Twitch and do these things. And, that's the only person I get to talk to. So to be able to come on shows and do things like this, it's a real honor to be able to, just be around people like me.
That is a great, I mean, especially during the pandemic, for me, I wasn't leaving. Um, my parents are both in their 80s, and so, I didn't want to get them, sick, and so I was home a lot to helping them out. So for me, participating this way and getting introduced to the Go Indie Now community and then the greater writing community was a huge benefit
Yeah.
to my mental health as well as just being incredibly enjoyable. And yeah, I've met a lot of people, not David Green, but there were a ton
Yeah.
of other people who were great, just the
You
best
know,
people.
David Green's all right. I feel, if I spent more time with him, he'd grow on me like, a fungus or the plague or a bad penny.
He's trouble. I've learned a lot about him that if it was public, it would be bad for him. So, and I don't want to
Yeah.
I don't want
Yeah.
to ruin his reputation, but it's true. Joe had a great question. There we go. Thanks, Joe. What would be your advice for those who haven't taken this leap yet? Being out there.
Stop trying to force yourself. Stop trying to be what everything and everybody expects you to be, and just let go. Just let go. Just say fuck it one day, throw it in the back burner, and run with scissors. Because even if you fall flat on your face, it's still the journey. It's still the adventure. It's still living a story that you can tell someday. You know. And it doesn't always have to be in print. It doesn't always have to be in print. Sometimes the best stories are, over a pirate glass filled full of tequila and a couple of bad decisions worth of being available.
Champion Nikki has a great point. I mean, support networks and writing groups are so important. And also that David Green is moss, flammable moss. But like some of those people I was mentioning that are real introverts and are deathly afraid of putting themselves out there for marketing. And I mean, what it seems to me, and I that makes it harder for them to get their book in front of new eyes and find readers. What's your advice for those people? Or do you think that's
pretend
true?
for a moment
Please.
and just get your mind out of, I'm marketing my book. You are sitting at a restaurant having a conversation with the people next to you and say, hey, I did this, or I have this story, or I have this situation. When you're in a job interview and they say, what are your qualifications? Well, I have the ability to conflict resolution through the fact that, I played D&D, or I wrote these stories, or I did something that, was completely be outside of the box. You're not promoting yourself. You're not promoting your stories. You're just telling another story. That's all you're doing is just telling another story. And it's how the story got to be a story. And that's all people want to know is how it went from in your head to in front of them.
That reminds me of my marketing plan, which is to meet everybody on the planet. Because if I could just become friends with like 4 billion people, I figure I'd have enough readers.
You can borrow my 1K because about 900 of them I do not speak to. And the other 100 are, family members. I live 10 feet from my dad's back door and I see him for coffee maybe once a month.
Wow.
It's just, it's life. You gotta just live it.
Well, yes. I mean, the alternative is
the alternative would be nice, but it's not an option at this point in time. So it's on the back burner with the whole, writing thing for right now. I'm waiting for it. It'll be my turn eventually. I'm not rushing it, and I'm not rushing anything else anymore because I'm old and I'm tired. And, I just want to get back to the basics again.
So to get back to your new plan, the advice is free, and your hope is that you're going to teach people things.
Yes.
And then if people don't want to do it themselves or they can't do it, you're either going to point them in the direction of a person
to a wonderful network. If I have the time, then I'd be glad to help them. But right now it's full-time school, full-time work, part-time job. Y'all met my 5 snakes, 3 dogs, and the rest of the zoo around here. You briefly saw, my loving and wonderful husband who needed a kiss before he took off on his 3-hour drive. And, it's a lot. And I don't want to be the one to disappoint them by saying, I'll do it and then not being able to. I would rather be like, okay, I have this network. I have Nikki who does this. I have, these other people that do that. And let me introduce you to somebody. And I can give them a little bit of background because I've already read the story. And I can say, we can try to do things like this. And then I can go back to my day job and I don't feel so bad like, I'm an abandonment.
Well, that's so valuable. I mean, one of the topics from the last show, the previous show, was, how many people are trying to rip off new authors.
Yeah,
right?
I saw that one.
and it's so true. I mean, I get so many emails and Facebook messages and
yeah. I don't even get those anymore.
Twitter messages.
I've been around so long they ignore me.
And so to have somebody who is offering their advice for legitimate people to help,
Yeah.
new authors or just struggling indie authors seems
I love reading a
very
story.
valuable.
Look, I don't even care if it's pure shit. I don't care if you write like a third grader. I don't care if you write like, Mercedes Lackey. I love reading a story. And I know that everybody loves telling the story or they wouldn't be freaking doing it.
Agreed.
And there has to be I feel like I'm just better as an in between. And I mean, you can literally go on my website and you can fill out the contact form and you can message me through that. You can message me through Facebook. You can go anywhere because I have had to do this social media so damn long that you can't not find me somewhere.
Well, what is your website again? I know you've
It,
given it one.
enchantinglyentangled.com.
I'm typing it down.
Yes. You should have seen it. This was before we actually had, these stupid little smartphones where I had to type Heather at enchantinglyentangled.com and my password to get into my effing email. All right. That was like horrible. Horrible
Yes,
technology.
indeed. Well, I hope everybody does go there, and I'm going to go there.
Yeah.
I want to check it
And,
out.
I have not made any money off my books. I have honestly given away more of my books than I have ever sold because I wasn't in it for the money. I was in it for telling a story. And I know a lot of other people out there need that extra money. They need that extra validation. They just need something that believes in them. And if that's me, good. If that's not me, but I know somebody else that it can be, even better. Because I've had my time. I've had my time in the spotlight. I'm ready to help other people get there. And I've been trying to push that for the last couple of years to get off the focus off of me and onto other people. And it just hasn't caught on yet. And to try to balance that with the author, I just want to say, and I took the opportunity to say today, just done. Just forget I'm an author. Just think of me as a friend, as a backup, as somebody to bounce ideas off of, as somebody, that has
Right.
been there, that can answer, even the weirdest question of, I'm going to date myself here, but I was in the Amazon Breakthrough Novel Award competition for 8 years in a row.
Wow.
I never made it. I made it past the second phase once. And I did all that by myself. And it was traumatizing. I have
Oh, I'm
PTSD.
sorry.
I'm heavily medicated. And, just
Well, your vision is beautiful. I mean, I love it. I, of course, still want all the money.
yeah.
So I urge
I want to
everybody,
help you
whoever
get the
watches
money.
this,
I have a beautiful job. I have a beautiful job where I make stupid money working. And, I stumbled into it. My boss is my best friend. I make more than enough money now, and I still live very well under my means because it's about the people for me. And, that's where I need to be in the next step of my life.
well, it's all about the money for me. So I want everybody, whoever watches this show, to buy all my books. I'm just saying.
If I remember your name by tomorrow, I'll buy your books too.
Well, I'll contact you on your website. So, because I do want your advice. All right. Well, that wraps it up. Thank you, Heather, so much for both being on the green room and then, of course, joining us for basking in the
Absolutely.
evergreen and fleshing out your vision more.
It's been
I
a
think
pleasure.
well, it has very much been a pleasure for me, and I'm just excited for all the people I think are going to discover your website and reach out to you for help and advice.
Yeah.
So, other than that, there's only one thing, and that is that it is always time to go indie now.